Hello, I'm Evelyn Stokes, host of the channel where we are your all-inclusive community resource for helpful tips and information. Today we have the honor of having Dr. Ken Massey with us today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Okay, now you sit on the council for the city of Farmington Hills.
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in that role.
Well, as a council member, we're engaged in governance of the city of Farmington Hills. I've been on the council now for approximately 9 years. 2 of those years I served as mayor pro tem. I actually am the managing director of a business here in the community and very involved. Love this community and want to continue seeing it move in a positive direction.
Okay. Now we're here today because you are actually the co-chair of the Farmington Area Suicide Prevention Task Force, correct?
That is correct.
Now tell me, what inspired that organization and what do you do in that force?
Well, I am, as you pointed out, a co-chair along with fellow council members Nancy Bates and Dr. Randy Bruce. And approximately 2 years ago, we saw an uptick in the number of suicide attempts in our youth, and we found that very disconcerting. So we decided to study the problem, see if there was something that we could do on a proactive basis. Other communities react to events. We wanted to be proactive. And what we found out is that there are a number of people that need assistance, and we were a little concerned that maybe we didn't have enough resources. Well, ultimately, the issue is not a lack of resource, but a lack of being able to connect those who need help with those resources that already exist. So the task force was formed to raise the awareness of this community that suicide and the depression that leads to it are treatable issues. Most suicides are preventable. And if we do, in a proactive fashion, if we are able to get the word out there and get people's awareness raised, we can help prevent tragedies.
That is an admirable task force, I must say. It's very important. Now, give me a little bit of background. When did you form the task force?
We originally started the task force in the early to mid-spring 2010. That was the initiation with the 3 of us getting together and starting to study the problem. Then by resolution of council, because we had to commit some resources to it, the formal task force was formed in the summer of 2010, and the word went out in the press that we were looking for members, and we now have 26 volunteer members of our task force. That includes representatives from the school district. We have liaisons from our police and fire, public safety liaisons, the police chief of Farmington Hills and the public safety director of the city of Farmington are members of the task force. We have mental health professionals, we have citizen volunteers, we have people from Common Ground, all coming together to deal with this problem.
So as we deal with this problem, tell me a little bit how you function as a task force, what type of resources. You mentioned Common Ground and other community leaders who are heavily involved, but how exactly do you provide resources to families who might be facing this problem or who have actually, unfortunately, had to deal with suicide?
Well, and the suicide survivor aspect is very difficult. It is an issue. The resources that we provide are in the form of information and connectivity. The information that we provide through a series of, we've done some cable shows. We also have public awareness sessions. We had 2 very large public awareness sessions in the fall of 2011. The kickoff event was called Out of the Darkness, and we really were pleasantly surprised. We had almost 250 residents who showed up for that, a series of discussants who presented on the topic, and then the resources such as Common Ground and the other community suicide prevention groups attended. They had tables, they provided information, handouts, and so forth. Then we have question and answers. We have a Facebook page. If you go to, just go to Facebook, search for Farmington and suicide, those 2 key words will get you to our Facebook page. On that Facebook page, we post pertinent articles, information on upcoming events, all of those types of things, and it also allows for a social media discussion of the issue.
Okay, so essentially your organization is there to kind of serve as a one spot, you know, as, for lack of a better term, for people to share information, to gain awareness, and essentially gather resources for this concern.
That's a great point, Evelyn. It really is focused on getting the information into people's hands.
Mm-hmm.
We're not treating people, you know, we're not trying to be a suicide crisis hotline. Those resources already exist.
Mm-hmm.
What we're trying to do is bring the topic forward, bring it out of the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back 40 years ago, 30 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
people didn't talk about cancer. And I like to use this as an analogy because I was raised in a household where we didn't talk about cancer. You know, that was a bad word because it was almost as if you said the word, you would contract the disease. Nowadays, suicide still falls into that. There's this fear that there's a contagion aspect. That if people talk about suicide, then you're going to plant that idea and people are going to go out and maybe see that as an out. Well, if we talk about suicide, the data is very clear. If we talk about it and get accurate information to people's hands and how they can seek help, because depression is more like an illness of cancer. Suicide is the terminal end of that illness. If we can get information into people's hands about what the signs and symptoms are, much like we now do with cancer, signs and symptoms of prostate cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer, people go get those screenings and they catch the disease in an early stage where it's treatable, and we save lives. If we can do the same thing, and that's our focus, if we can get the information about mental health, the signs and symptoms of depression or early onset mental illness into people's hands, they can help get their family members into treatment and offset the terminal end of that disease.
That's an extraordinary task that you guys do, and obviously that's really needed in our community. So thinking about what you do, and you said you had 250 people come to your Out of Darkness event. What were some of the positive outcomes in the respect of creating awareness, providing resources, sharing helpful information?
Well, we did all of those things. I'm very pleased to say it's a difficult issue to get metrics on directly. Part of that is that people don't want to talk about it. Our mantra, by the way, is let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
Because we have to do that. And it can be uncomfortable.
Right.
It can be a very emotional thing. From our Out of the Darkness event, we've had 2 families that have reached out to members of the task force and indicated that the information that they were provided, the information they took home, initiated conversations with their kids. And in 2 cases, the kids actually said, "I'm glad you asked me that," and then shared with their parents that they had been contemplating a suicide attempt. Those kids are now successfully undergoing treatment. The families did reach out to us to let us know. If there are 2, there are probably more.
Yeah.
So our goal was if we can touch one person. And I would like to say it's not just kids. Suicide attempts in Oakland County have gone up, since 2008, have gone up 21%. This also involves a lot of our adults. And just so that viewers know that in the city of Farmington Hills, in 2011, 10 people took their own lives. Now, those were all adults. We ended up having the police department, public safety department had to intercede and petition into the hospital over about 190 people between adults and kids. In the kids, there were 34. Now, that said, those people are now undergoing treatment.
No, 34 who need that type of, who are attempting or interested in threatening to attempt suicide.
Yes.
34 young people.
34 of our young people.
Wow. And you said in Farmington Hills, 10 adults
10 adults
killed themselves last year?
took their own lives, yes.
Those, 1 is too many. 10 is tremendous.
Oh, every year, about 36,000 people in our country end their life by suicide. And this is increasing. Could be because the economy has been bad, people feel increasingly disconnected, they have family difficulties, any number of reasons. But if we can get, when people feel despondent, if we can get information to them and to their families that there is help out there, and that's what we want to do. That's our focus.
So essentially what you're saying, this is a community-wide concern. It's not just certain people or certain people in a certain area. This is a community-wide issue.
It most certainly is. And recently we've heard about a young person, 7 years of age in the city of Detroit, who took their own life. So the age range we're talking about, our focus right now is their 15 to 24-year-olds. Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta indicate that in that age group, suicide is the third leading cause of death. And this is not to say, and I do want to reiterate, it's not to say that adults don't have this issue. But it's a huge, daunting task. We decided to focus on our youth first. So we have the two cities, the city of Farmington, city of Farmington Hills, and our school board. Our school system has been involved in this effort. Eventually, we would love to work on the adult issues. You've no doubt heard that our soldiers come back, have PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, and they are taking their own lives at an alarming rate. Here again, another topic that hopefully we can take. I had a great meeting recently with our Commission on Children, Youth, and Families, because we want to try and work together to see what we can do to ensure that in a time with limited resources, that these two groups are working hand in glove to deal with. So the Commission for Children, Youth, and Families may take on some of the adult issues and dealing with depression, while the task force is working on the youth, and vice versa. We will support the community in that direction.
Well, Ken, I have to say your work is certainly needed, and I have to give you, your work is admirable, because it is clearly a significant part of our community, and we have to be aware of something like this. Like you said, we just talk about it. Talk about it in the community, talk about it with family. And so you prompt people to talk about it, to seek resources in the Farmington Area Suicide Prevention Task Force, but talk about it at home. What are some of the signs that people might be concerned about, and what should we be aware of if a significant other or a loved one, we're concerned about them in that area?
It's a great question. And in fact, one of the resources that we've provided through the task force is we have refrigerator magnets. And on those we list...
I have one right here.
I did share one.
Easy. Put on the refrigerator.
And on those refrigerator magnets, we tried to list some of the key signs and symptoms of depression. Because if you identify those, and it's not just one or two, but you see a profile. And things like mood swings, irritability, sudden unexplained increases or decreases in weight, changes in appetite, changes in sleeping patterns, people who are preoccupied with the thoughts of suicide or thoughts of death, people who may be giving away prized possessions, people who lose interest in things that they've always enjoyed. These are all signals that something's going on with that person's thinking process and their psyche, and one might want to be worried about it. And what we found is that suicide survivors, many people will say, I didn't know. I wish we knew something was going on because we could have helped. Because suicide survivors are often they have a lot of feelings of guilt.
Their family members and friends and spouses.
Yes, and suicide, while some people see it as an out, what they really do is they may end the pain they're in. But really what they do is they amplify that pain in everyone they know and they left behind. And those people are feeling, why? Why couldn't I have done something else? How could I have helped that person?
Why didn't I say something that day? I noticed that she was giving all away of her possessions, or the self-destructive behavior. There could have been a better way to handle that, right?
Yeah, think about the person. Think about a good friend who suddenly hands you one of their most prized possessions, that I really want you to have this. You may be touched that they're giving that to you, but then you might want to also ask the question, why are they giving that to you?
Right.
And because if something happens to that person, then you have that guilt. And suicide survivors look back at that list of symptomatology and say, I see this, I saw, this person did this person did
Sure.
that. And if they're aware of that up front, they can counsel that person, help that person,
Right.
put your arm around that person and say, let's go.
And it's all,
There's no stigma
yeah,
in getting help.
it's all about the love. Just show the love.
It is.
And so let me reiterate a few. You have a good list here, and again, someone can look up on Facebook the Farmington Area Suicide Prevention Task Force to hopefully possibly get this list, correct?
Yep. We
So-
have that information, yes?
So things or signs that people should be aware of are feeling of sad or worthlessness, excessive frustration or irritability, change in appetite or weight, loss of interest and enjoyment in activities, change in sleeping patterns, difficulty thinking and concentrating, feeling helpless and hopeless, self-destructive or risk-taking behavior, extreme withdrawal from friends and family, giving away favorite possessions, neglect in work or personal appearance, physical symptoms, for example, fatigue, headaches, stomach aches, preoccupation with death, or thoughts of suicide. Now, we could all experience some of these things to an extent without thinking about suicide, but really, if this is consistent, and people should seek resources in your task force.
If it's consistent and extreme. And the other thing that's not necessarily on that list, but almost goes without saying, is if someone says, I'm going to injure myself. If
Right.
someone threatens to injure themselves. And it wouldn't be the task force that you want to reach out to.
Okay.
It is common ground.
Sure.
If it's extreme, call the police department, call 911. Take that person to the local emergency department. Call the Michigan Suicide Prevention Hotline, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. The numbers are actually listed on that magnet. They're also available on our Facebook page and in many of the other things that we hand out, because we want that person to get help. Now, one of the difficulties there is, how do you approach somebody? Let's say you and I are very close friends, and I notice these changes. How do you initiate that conversation? That's a common question, and there's no perfect way to do it. Just do it.
Just do it.
I mean, if you care about that person, you say, hey, I've noticed some changes, and what's going on here? We've heard stories of people who have interceded in a suicide. As simple as a great example was a woman that was going to commit suicide by jumping off a bridge. And a person who she did not know, walking past her, actually just stopped and said, and noticed a little something different, and had just asked her, how are you doing this morning? And when she said she wasn't doing well, a person as opposed to what we normally do, which is sort of passively blow each other off. Oh, how you doing? Good. See ya. Actually stopped and said, really, what's wrong? And engaged her in a conversation, was able to determine there was a threat, did reach out, brought in the officials. This woman received treatment, and actually said it was only because that person cared when they simply said, how are you this morning? As a community, that's something we can do. We should care about each other, and if we're in a community
Absolutely.
that cares, we can make a difference and prevent a tragedy by a
Right.
simple question.
That's a very powerful concept and very true. So as you grow the Farmington Area Prevention Task Force, Suicide Prevention Task Force, what are your goals in the coming year? What are your goals for the future?
We have had two large community awareness events. Our first one was held at City Hall last September, and then later in the fall we had one that was sponsored in conjunction with us with the Parent Teacher Student Associations at the schools. Both of those were the general awareness sessions, painting the picture. This does affect our community. It does affect us. Subsequently, we're now moving from general awareness into specific topics, and we're calling them community conversations. Every 3 to 4 months, we're planning on having people come in, and we put together a panel of subject material experts. Those people then present on the topic. Most recently, in May of 2012, we had a LGBT suicide awareness, which is for those individuals who have gender identification differences, so LGBT is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender youth, there's an 8 to 10-fold higher risk of suicide attempt.
Oh, my.
So we brought together a panel of experts. They talked about the issues, and in fact, then that was followed by a question and answer session. And we have one coming up in the fall, which is the double-edged sword of social media. Social media, while it allows people to be connected, and for instance, our use of our Facebook page, we can get information out to people. That's a very positive side of social media. There are also some dark sides of social media, and we've all heard of people being bullied on social media, and there's some just other things. So we're going to bring together a panel of folks that know that space to talk about it. We have other community conversations that are planned and dates to be determined on bullying, substance abuse, depression itself, particularly in youth, anxiety over performance. That could be sports performance, grade performance, etc. So all of these are going to be ongoing every couple of months, presented to the community. And there may be segments of the community that are interested and others that may not. But that's, we're going to try to get that information out.
Well, that's a lot of good work. So how do you fund all this great work in this community?
Well, thanks for asking.
Yeah.
That's and with limited resources within the community, a lot of the work is done by volunteers. And that's all the members of the Suicide Prevention Task Force are volunteers. And then for those materials that we need funding for, we have a memorial fund. It's the Graham Smith Memorial Fund for the Prevention of Suicide.
Okay.
It's, I will tell you that I am a suicide survivor. Graham was my stepson, and about a little over a year ago, he took his own life. And it was after we had started this work.
Right.
So my wife and I decided, since this is so key and so important, and I will tell you, like every other parent that undergoes this, we didn't know.
Yeah.
And we look back at the list. So when I say that you look at the list, there are things on that list that will bring you back. It is so true. It will affect you. And so if you think you're immune, you're never immune.
No.
That's why we want to get this work out there. So what we did is, rather than trying to figure out what we needed to do, we established the Memorial Fund, and it is now currently going through all the IRS paperwork to be a 501c3. So that foundation will then go forward in perpetuity and be able to provide funds for the work of the task force.
So this work is not only for the love of a community, but a personal event for you.
It is now.
And that's even a greater driver, probably for you, just to continue to build your community, because we don't want other families to have to go through this.
No, I guarantee
we
you.
want those numbers to be zero. And you should be given a lot of credit, and your coworkers a lot of credit for the work you do, because it is so critical in our community, especially with the bullying that we're dealing with right now, and a lot of concerns that our teenagers are dealing with in high schools, and a lot of pressures that people have to deal with. And it's good that your organization is on the landscape of online social media, so the positive can come out of that. So we can obliterate the online bullying and help people build people up in their community through online and social activity.
One of the things that we found, we have a member of the Mayor's Youth Council as part of our task force. And it was one of those aha moments when we were talking about phone calls and so forth. And this member of our youth community said, if you think we're going to phone you, we're going to text. We're going to do something else. And it was basically her comment that ended up getting us to the point where we needed that social media outlet as well.
So tell me again, how can we find you? How can people find you? And what number should they call if they just want to get some information?
You can find me, you can find the task force by going to Facebook and just 2 words, Farmington and suicide, and the page will pop up. There's contact information on that page.
Okay.
Another outlet is to call the city manager's office, which is 248-871-2500, and they will they can take a message and get in touch with myself or the other 2 co-chairs And then my email is out there, and it's actually quite easy. It's kmassey at fhgov.com, which is that's my email at the city. So any of those ways you can reach us. The fund is also published out there. It's through Huntington Bank, and that's just the Graham E. Smith Memorial Fund.
Okay.
It can be sent to Huntington Bank, and they get us that, or sent to the city or to my home address.
Or if it's really an emergency, I see that you have your nice card here, that someone can simply call 1-800-273-TALK. That is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's if it's a crisis.
If it's a crisis.
All the other information is just information that if you want awareness information and so forth, refrigerator magnets and things like that. But if it's a crisis, if it's really critical, call 911.
Okay.
That's the simplest way if you can't remember anything else.
Right.
And our police department, our public safety departments are very sensitive to this issue. So if it is a crisis, the suicide prevention number that you just gave,
Okay.
Common Ground is another one.
Okay. Ken, thank you so much. Your work is extraordinary. I wish you all much success. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you for the time.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Of course.
It's been very pleasurable.
And everybody can help. So
Everybody can.
I'm Evelyn Stokes. We have been speaking with Dr. Ken Massey. He's the co-chair of the Farmington Area Suicide Prevention Task Force, where they are a lifeline or a resource for community for the entire Farmington Hills community or anyone in the metro area. For more information about the task force, and if you want to contact Dr. Massey, you can search on Facebook. That's Farmington Suicide on Facebook, or you can actually call the Farmington Hills City Manager. The number is 248-871-2500. And if you do have a critical crisis, of course, call 911. I'm Evelyn Stokes with the channel. Again, we've been speaking to Dr. Ken Massey from the Farmington Area Suicide Prevention Task Force. Thank you for joining the channel, where of course we're your all-inclusive resource for helpful community tips and information. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.